Mike Harrington's boots crunched against the perfectly manicured grass of Research Station Omega-7's Central Plaza. Each step a reminder of how hard the engineers had worked to replicate Earth's gravity. Above him, the artificial sky stretched in an endless azure dome, complete with wispy clouds that drifted past holographic mountain peaks. He'd helped install that system himself 3 years ago, and sometimes he still caught himself staring up at it, searching for the seams. Harrington, Station Chief Roberts' voice crackled through his comm unit. Drop whatever you're doing and get to Docking Bay 3. Now. Mike paused mid-stride, already mentally cataloging which systems might have failed this time. What's the emergency, Chief? The kind that comes with diplomatic credentials and enough clearance to shut down half the station if we don't roll out the red carpet. The Star Sculptors sent an ambassador. Shit. Mike ran a hand through his short dark hair. I thought they weren't due for another week. They weren't. Just get your ass over there. And Harrington, try not to stare. They hate that. The comm clicked off before Mike could respond. He changed direction, heading for the transport tube that would take him to the docking level. Star Sculptors. In 15 years of space work, he'd never actually seen one in person. Nobody had, not on Omega-7. They were notorious for their privacy and their unique biology. The transport tube deposited him at Docking Bay 3's main entrance, just as the airlock cycle completed. Chief Roberts stood at attention, his usual casual demeanor replaced by rigid formality. Mike fell in line beside him, straightening his maintenance uniform. The inner door slid open with a soft hiss. Mike's first thought was that someone had released a cloud of bioluminescent gas into the airlock. His second thought vanished entirely as the gas coalesced into a humanoid form that seemed to flow rather than walk into the docking bay. Ambassador Lintara moved like liquid mercury given consciousness, her body a shifting canvas of iridescent patterns that rippled with each step. The basic structure was humanoid: 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, and a head. But the details refused to remain constant. One moment her skin gleamed like polished chrome. The next it developed subtle textures that caught the light like mother of pearl. Ambassador, Roberts bowed slightly. Welcome to Research Station Omega-7. I'm Station Chief Roberts, and this is Michael Harrington. Her voice carried musical undertones, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Your reputation precedes you. Mike blinked, caught off guard by the direct address. It does? A pattern of golden spirals briefly illuminated her surface. The mechanic who realigned a quantum drive core in open space because the repair drones were too slow? The one who jury-rigged a life support system with nothing but spare parts and determination? Her form shifted, becoming slightly more defined, more human-like. Yes, your reputation precedes you. Those stories tend to leave out the part where I nearly got myself killed, Mike said, fighting to maintain eye contact with a face that kept subtly changing shape. But I appreciate the recognition. Another pattern rippled across her surface, this one a deep blue that seemed to pulse with its own gravity. Modesty, how unexpected. She turned to Roberts. Chief, I specifically requested Mr. Harrington as my technical escort during my stay. I trust this won't be an issue. Roberts shot Mike a warning glance. Of course not, Ambassador. Though I should mention that some areas of the station are restricted. Yes, I'm aware. She moved closer to Mike, her form becoming more defined with each step. But Mr. Harrington has the necessary clearance, doesn't he? After all, someone needs to maintain those restricted areas. Mike felt the air temperature drop several degrees as she approached. Not from any environmental system, from her. The closer she got, the more his skin tingled with what felt like static electricity. I do have the clearance, he confirmed, meeting her gaze. Her eyes, when they finally settled into a recognizable form, were silver with hints of swirling cosmos in their depths. Though I'm curious why you'd request a mechanic as an escort. Are you? A smile played across her features, transforming them into something both more and less human. Perhaps I simply appreciate competence. Or perhaps, her surface rippled with patterns of deep purple and electric blue. Perhaps I have other reasons. Mike maintained his professional demeanor, but he couldn't help noticing how those patterns seemed to draw him in, like visual gravity wells. He took a step closer, purely for better observation, of course. Immediately, warning patterns of bright red and orange flashed across her surface, and she glided back with fluid grace. Careful, Mr. Harrington. Proximity to a star sculptor can be overwhelming for humans. We wouldn't want you to lose your professional composure, would we? The warning patterns faded into something more subtle, more alluring. Mike forced himself to focus on her words rather than the hypnotic display. I appreciate the warning, Ambassador. Shall we begin the tour? Please. She gestured for him to lead, her arm momentarily becoming more translucent before solidifying again. Show me everything. As they walked through the station's corridors, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that he was being tested. Every time he stopped to explain a system or point out a feature, Lintara would move just slightly closer than necessary, her surface dancing with patterns that seemed designed to catch his peripheral vision. The environmental controls are through here, he said, gesturing to a sealed door. We maintain redundant systems for... Fascinating, she interrupted, flowing past him to examine the door's control panel. Her body stretched slightly, becoming more serpentine as she studied the mechanism. But I'm more interested in how you maintain them. Do you work alone in these restricted areas, Mr. Harrington? Usually, it's easier to focus without... He stopped as her form rippled with what looked like stars bursting into supernovas. Without distractions? She completed his thought, turning to face him. Am I distracting you? Before Mike could answer, an alarm blared through the corridor. Red warning lights bathed them both in crimson glow, making Lintara's surface erupt in sympathetic patterns. Environmental system failure in Section 7G, the station's AI announced, requesting immediate maintenance response. Mike checked his tablet. That's the Auxiliary Atmospheric Processing Unit. We? Lintara's form became more compact, more focused. Surely you don't expect an ambassador to assist with repairs. No, but since you're so interested in how we maintain things. Mike matched her earlier teasing tone. Consider it a practical demonstration. For a moment, her surface went completely still, the first time since her arrival. Then a cascade of silver and gold patterns raced across her form. Very well, Mr. Harrington. Lead the way. Let's see if your reputation for handling difficult situations is deserved. As they headed toward the malfunctioning system, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that the timing of this failure was too convenient. But when he glanced at Lintara, her surface had already shifted into new patterns, each one more mesmerizing than the last. The repair would require them to work in close quarters. Very close quarters. And judging by the way her surface was already beginning to pulse with anticipatory patterns, she knew it too. After you, Ambassador, he said, gesturing to the maintenance access. Unless proximity to a human would be too overwhelming for you. Her response was a display of colors he'd never seen before. Patterns that made his eyes water and his heart race. Oh, Mr. Harrington, she said, her voice carrying harmonic overtones that seemed to resonate in his bones. I think we both know who's at risk of being overwhelmed. She flowed past him into the access tunnel, her form briefly brushing against him with a sensation like static electricity mixed with silk. The contact lasted less than a second, but it left his skin tingling and his pulse elevated. Game on, Ambassador, he thought. Game on. The maintenance access tunnel's soft blue emergency lighting cast strange shadows as Mike followed Lintara's luminescent form. Her surface patterns provided more illumination than the backup systems, creating an ethereal light show that danced across the metallic walls. The atmospheric processor's just ahead, Mike said, trying to focus on the tablet's diagnostic readout, instead of how Lintara's body seemed to absorb and reflect the emergency lights in impossible ways. Looks like the quantum harmonizer's out of sync with the primary oscillation matrix, Lintara finished, her form stretching upward to examine an overhead conduit. The movement made her surface ripple like moonlight on water. How fascinating that such an advanced piece of equipment would malfunction precisely when I requested a tour. Mike paused mid-step. You think this isn't a coincidence? Mr. Harrington, she turned, her form condensing into a more humanoid shape. that somehow made her seem both more approachable and more alien. In my experience, malfunctions around star sculptors are rarely coincidental. Our natural electromagnetic field tends to interact with certain types of technology. You're saying you caused this? He raised an eyebrow, noting how her surface briefly flickered with patterns that reminded him of a suppressed laugh. Not intentionally, though I must admit, her voice dropped to a harmonious whisper that seemed to vibrate through his chest. The resulting situation isn't entirely unwelcome. The tunnel narrowed as they approached the processor housing, forcing them closer together. Mike's skin prickled with electromagnetic energy as Lintara's form adjusted to the confined space, her surface now displaying slow waves of deep purple that seemed to pull at something in his gut. "The access panel's behind you," he said, gesturing to the wall where she had practically merged with the shadows. "I'll need to get closer." The patterns across her surface accelerated, creating a hypnotic display that made the air itself seem to shimmer. How terribly inconvenient. She didn't move. Mike stepped forward, reaching for the panel. The motion brought him within inches of her form, close enough to feel the strange energy field she emanated. His hair stood on end, and the tablet in his hand flickered. "Careful," Lintara warned, though her tone carried more playfulness than concern. "Prolonged exposure to a star sculptor's electromagnetic field can have interesting effects on human physiology. Enhanced sensory perception, heightened awareness, sometimes even temporary telepathic resonance." "Is that what this tingling sensation is?" Mike asked, trying to keep his voice steady as he removed the panel, his arms nearly bracketing her now. "Or is that just you showing off?" Her laugh was like crystal wind chimes in a digital storm. "Perhaps both." Her surface shifted, creating patterns that seemed to reach out toward him before retreating. Though I must say most humans would have backed away by now. The sensation can be quite intense. I'm not most humans. Mike began working on the processor, hyper-aware of how every small movement brought different parts of him into proximity with her ever-shifting form. "And you're not exactly discouraging me." "No," she agreed, her voice taking on new harmonic overtones that made his fingers tingle where they touched the metal housing. "I'm not." A spark jumped from the processor, arcing through the air between them. Instead of dissipating, it seemed to dance across Lintara's surface, joining her patterns in their mesmerizing display. Her form briefly lost cohesion, spreading out like a constellation of living stars before pulling back into humanoid shape. "That was," Mike started. "Unexpected," Lintara finished, her voice slightly less controlled than before. "It seems your technology finds me as interesting as I find you." The processor hummed to life, but the diagnostic panel flashed red warnings. "The harmonizer's still out of alignment," Mike said. "I'll need to reach past you to do it." Her surface blazed with new patterns, these ones moving so fast they left after images in his vision. "Unless you're afraid?" Mike met her gaze, or what passed for it, as her features kept shifting between different configurations of otherworldly beauty. "Of you? Number? Of what might happen if that electromagnetic field of yours decides to play with our equipment again? Maybe a little." "Wise," she purred, the sound carrying subsonic frequencies that made his bones vibrate. "But not wise enough to stop." He reached past her, feeling the energy field intensify where his arm nearly touched her surface. The harmonizer's controls were just beyond her, requiring him to lean closer still. Her form responded to his proximity, patterns swirling faster, colors shifting through spectrums he was pretty sure humans weren't supposed to be able to see. "The field goes both ways, you know," she said softly, her voice now carrying overtones that seemed to bypass his ears entirely and speak directly to his nervous system. "I can feel your electromagnetic signature too, your bioelectricity, your neural patterns. They're fascinating." The harmonizer's display swam before his eyes, numbers and graphs overlapping with the reflection of Lintara's ever-changing surface. "Is that a compliment or a scientific observation? Can it be both?" She shifted slightly, bringing her form microscopically closer to his outstretched arm. The air between them crackled with visible energy. I find humans intriguing in general, but new patterns emerged on her surface, these ones moving like slow whirlpools of light that seemed to draw his gaze inexorably inward. You're something else entirely. A warning alarm chirped from the processor. Mike forced himself to focus on the readings instead of the way Lintara's patterns were starting to sync with his heartbeat. The harmonizer's cycling too fast. If we don't stabilize it, then perhaps we should stabilize it, she interrupted, her form suddenly becoming more defined, more solid. Together. Before Mike could respond, she extended what might have been a hand. It was hard to tell as it kept shifting between different geometric configurations toward the harmonizer. The moment she made contact, the device's readings stabilized, but new patterns of energy began coursing through the surrounding circuits. What are you? Sharing my field control with the harmonizer, she explained, her voice now carrying harmonics that matched the processor's hum perfectly. But I need you to adjust the quantum settings. Our fields together should create a perfect resonance pattern. The implications hit him like a gravity surge. You want us to synchronize our electromagnetic fields? Isn't that a little intimate for a first meeting? Her surface erupted in patterns that could only be described as laughter given visual form. Mr. Harrington, are you suggesting that I might have ulterior motives for requesting you as my escort? The thought had crossed my mind. He reached for the controls, and this time, when the energy field intensified between them, he didn't pull back. Along with several other thoughts that probably violate about a dozen diplomatic protocols. Only a dozen? Her form rippled with what might have been appreciation. How disappointing. I was hoping for at least 20. The harmonizer's pitch changed as their combined adjustments took effect, and suddenly the air itself seemed to sing with electromagnetic resonance. Lintara's patterns synchronized with the field, creating a display so beautiful it almost hurt to look at, while the sensation of her energy field meeting his bioelectricity sent waves of pleasant tingles through his entire nervous system. Now that, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with something deep in his consciousness, is what I call proper field synchronization. Is this normal diplomatic procedure for star sculptors? Mike managed to ask, fighting to maintain his professional demeanor, despite the fact that every cell in his body was humming in harmony with her energy field. No, she admitted, her patterns shifting into something slower, more deliberate. This is something else entirely. The processor's systems finally stabilized, but neither of them moved to break the connection. In the confined space of the maintenance tunnel, surrounded by the gentle hum of synchronized fields and the ethereal light of Lintara's ever-changing surface, Mike realized he might be in way over his head, and somehow he couldn't bring himself to care. The next morning, Mike stood in Chief Roberts' office, trying not to fidget as his superior scrolled through an incident report on his tablet. The chief's expression grew increasingly grim with each swipe. 3 system failures in 6 hours, Roberts finally said, looking up. All in sections the ambassador visited. Want to explain that? Mike kept his face neutral. Star sculptors have unique electromagnetic signatures. Some interference is expected. Cut the bullshit, Harrington. Roberts tossed the tablet onto his desk. I've got Dr. Chen from Xenobiology practically climbing the walls about these interference patterns. Says they're unlike anything in our database on star sculptor physiology. Sarah's analyzing the patterns? Mike tried to ignore the way his skin still tingled from yesterday's maintenance work. She's not the only one. Roberts leaned forward. Our new head of security is taking a particular interest. Jack Morrison, transferred in last week from Europa Station. Real hard-ass about protocol. A sharp knock interrupted them. The door slid open to reveal a tall man with military-straight posture and the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from granite, specifically to disapprove of things. His security uniform was impossibly crisp. Speaking of, Roberts sighed. Harrington, meet Commander Morrison. Morrison's handshake was precisely firm enough to establish dominance without technically qualifying as assault. I understand you've been spending time with our guest. Just doing my job, Commander, the ambassador requested. A technical escort, yes. Morrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. Interesting choice, given her diplomatic status. Tell me, what did you discuss during yesterday's maintenance emergency? Before Mike could answer, his comm unit chirped. Harrington here. Mike! Sarah Chen's excited voice filled the office. You need to see this. My lab now. Bring the ambassador. Morrison's eyebrows drew together. Dr. Chen, this is Commander Morrison. Any findings regarding the ambassador should be, oh, new security chief, right. Sorry, but this can't wait. The resonance patterns from yesterday's incident? They're not random interference. They're... The comm cut off abruptly. Mike was moving before he consciously decided to, Morrison and Roberts right behind him. They found Sarah's lab in chaos. Equipment scattered, displays showing cascading errors, and in the center of it all, Dr. Sarah Chen gesturing animatedly at a holographic display, while Ambassador Lintara observed with what might have been amusement. Finally, Sarah barely glanced at them. Look at this! The hologram showed overlapping wave patterns that made Mike's head hurt just looking at them. Lintara's surface rippled with corresponding frequencies. Fascinating, the ambassador said, her form shifting to mirror some of the displayed patterns. You've isolated the quantum harmonics. Exactly, Sarah bounced on her toes. These aren't just electromagnetic fields. They're quantum entangled information packets. The interference is actually classified, Morrison cut in. Dr. Chen, you are not authorized to discover that star sculptors use quantum entanglement for faster-than-light communication? Lintra's form pulsed with patterns that seemed to mock Morrison's rigid stance. I believe that particular secret has just escaped containment. Mike caught subtle variations in her patterns. Concern beneath the apparent amusement. That's why you requested me specifically. You needed someone who could access the quantum harmonizer systems. Among other reasons, her surface briefly displayed patterns that made him glad Morrison couldn't interpret star sculptor body language. Though I must admit, yesterday's synchronization was not entirely planned. This is a serious security breach, Morrison declared. Ambassador, I must insist. The lights went out. Emergency systems kicked in immediately, but instead of the usual blue backup lighting, the lab filled with an angry red glow. Warning klaxons blared. Station-wide power fluctuation, the AI announced. Emergency protocols engaged. Warning, quantum containment systems at 60% and falling. The main reactor. Mike was already moving. Ambassador, is coming with you? Lintara finished, her form now pulsing with urgent patterns. This is exactly what I was investigating. Someone is using our quantum communication frequencies to... Another surge rocked the station. Blast doors slammed shut, sealing them in the lab section. Quantum containment at 40%, the AI warned. Emergency evacuation protocols initiated. Override, Morrison barked. Security clearance, Morrison Alpha 7, unable to comply. System lockout in effect. Sarah's fingers flew across her console. The quantum harmonics are being amplified through the station's power grid. It's creating a cascade effect in the containment systems. Can you stop it? Roberts demanded. Maybe, but I need access to the main reactor controls. She looked up at Mike. Access that only our resident maintenance hero has. Mike felt Lintara move closer, her surface now rippling with complex patterns he recognized from yesterday. Together, then? Since our fields are already synchronized, Morrison stepped between them. Absolutely not. This is clearly an attempt to... The lights flickered again. This time, when they stabilized, all the displays showed the same message. Quantum containment critical. Breach imminent. Commander, Mike said carefully, right now you have two choices. Let us try to save the station, or evacuate and watch it tear itself apart. Morrison's jaw clenched. You have 10 minutes. After that, I'm initiating emergency protocols and launching escape pods. Such confidence in our abilities, Lintara commented, her form flowing around Morrison to reach Mike. Shall we prove him wrong? They moved quickly through the emergency-lit corridors, Sarah providing guidance through their comms while Morrison and Roberts coordinated evacuation preparations. Each section they passed showed signs of the quantum cascade, systems failing, energy patterns distorting. The reactor's just ahead, Mike said, trying to ignore how Lintara's proximity made his skin buzz with remembered resonance. But the containment chamber will be flooded with radiation. For humans, perhaps. Her surface shifted, becoming more crystalline. My form can adapt to protect against such trivial concerns, though maintaining physical contact with me would be advisable. Advisable, Mike repeated, noting how her patterns seemed to flicker with something like anticipation. You're enjoying this, aren't you? A life-threatening crisis requiring intimate proximity to an intriguing human? Her laugh carried harmonics that made the emergency lights dance. I can think of worse situations. They reached the reactor control room to find it bathed in quantum fire, visible distortions in space-time itself flickering around the containment sphere. The controls were alive with warning lights and screaming alarms. Now this, Lintara said, her form shifting to something more abstract and mesmerizing, is what I call a second date. Mike couldn't help laughing as they moved toward the controls. Most people just go to dinner. How terribly conventional. Her surface rippled with patterns that somehow conveyed both amusement and focus. Ready for another field synchronization, Mr. Harrington? This time with considerably higher stakes. Just like earlier, but trying to save the station instead of fixing a harmonizer. No pressure. Oh, there will be pressure. Her form began to envelop him, creating a protective barrier against the radiation while maintaining distinct points of contact that sent jolts of electromagnetic sensation through his nervous system. Among other things, the quantum fire grew more intense as they worked, their combined fields creating complex interference patterns that slowly brought the containment systems back under control. Each adjustment required perfect synchronization, their energies merging and separating in a dance that was both technical and intimate. I should mention, Lintara said as they reached a particularly delicate sequence, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with Mike's very atoms, that this level of field synchronization is considered extremely personal in my culture. You mean it's not standard procedure to merge electromagnetic fields on the second date? Mike managed to joke, though his entire body was humming with the intensity of their connection. Only with very special humans who don't flinch away from quantum fire. Her patterns shifted into configurations that made his breath catch. Or very dangerous ones. Which am I? That, she said, her form pulsing with colors he was pretty sure humans weren't supposed to be able to perceive, is exactly what I'm here to find out. The containment systems finally stabilized, quantum fire fading to its normal controlled burn. But neither of them moved to break their connection immediately, both aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. Well, Mike said finally, I hope this rate's better than dinner and a movie. Lintra's laugh sent cascades of light rippling through both their fields. Oh, Mr. Harrington, we're just getting started. From the control room doorway came the sound of someone clearing their throat very deliberately. They turned to find Morrison, Roberts, and Sarah all staring at them, with varying expressions of shock, suspicion, and scientific fascination. The station is secure, Lintara announced, her form reluctantly separating from Mike, but maintaining subtle points of contact. Though I believe we need to discuss who might have access to Star Sculptor quantum frequencies, and why they would use them to target this particular station. Among other things, Morrison said darkly, his eyes fixed on where Lintara's field still visibly interacted with Mike's bioelectricity. Sarah was practically vibrating with excitement. The resonance patterns during containment were incredible. The quantum entanglement levels suggest that this situation is more complex than anyone realized. Lintara interrupted smoothly. Her surface displayed warning patterns only Mike could read clearly. Perhaps we should continue this discussion somewhere more private. As they left the reactor room, Mike caught fragments of coded patterns in Lintara's surface, messages meant for him alone, suggesting that their quantum synchronization had created something permanent, something that would make their future encounters even more interesting and dangerous. He was definitely in over his head now, and he still didn't care. The secure conference room hummed with tension. Mike stood near the holographic display, watching as Sarah Chen's findings painted a disturbing picture of the station's recent system failures. The quantum signatures are definitely internal, Sarah explained, her excitement barely contained. Someone on the station is amplifying Ambassador Lintara's natural field to mask their own activities. Morrison's granite face somehow became even harder. And it took a xenobiologist to discover this because, Lintara interjected, her form rippling with barely suppressed irritation, your security protocols were specifically designed to ignore Star Sculptor quantum signatures. Rather convenient for someone planning to use them as cover. Someone with high-level access, Roberts added, studying personnel files. The sabotage points all required alpha clearance. Mike's tablet chirped with an incoming alert. His eyes widened as he read it. We've got bigger problems. The quantum harmonic cascade wasn't just the attack. It was a test run. Someone's trying to create a controlled quantum singularity in the station's core. Impossible, Morrison snapped. The containment systems are already compromised. Lintara's surface erupted in urgent patterns. The synchronization field Mike and I created earlier, it wasn't just stopping the cascade, it was preventing something much worse. Sarah's fingers flew across her console. She's right. The quantum readings are off the charts. If these patterns continue, the lights died. This time, even the emergency systems remained dark. Only Lintara's bioluminescence provided illumination, her surface pulsing with complex warning patterns. Full station shutdown, the AI announced, its voice distorted. Quantum containment critical. Warning, artificial singularity detected in central core. Estimated time to critical mass, 15 minutes. Evacuate the station, Morrison ordered. Now? No. Mike and Lintara spoke simultaneously. Their eyes met across the darkness, quantum resonance humming between them. The singularity is still forming, Lintara continued. It can be contained, but you'll need our synchronized field, Mike finished. Like before, only stronger. Much stronger. Her patterns shifted to something more serious, more vulnerable than he'd seen before. This level of synchronization, it's not just dangerous, it's intimate in ways humans aren't meant to experience. Morrison stepped forward, his face ghostly in Lintara's light. This is exactly what the saboteur wants. Ambassador, you can't what, Commander? A new voice cut through the darkness. Share classified Star Sculptor technology with humans? Create permanent quantum bonds? Or expose your entire operation? A figure emerged from the shadows. Dr. James Weber, the station's quantum physics lead. He held what looked like a modified containment unit, its surface crawling with distorted energy patterns. Hello, Lintara, he said softly. The consortium sends its regards. Lintara's form contracted, patterns flaring with recognition and fear. Weber, I should have known. The quantum consortium's been trying to weaponize our biology for years. And thanks to you, we finally succeeded. Weber's smile was cold. Your field signatures, your quantum frequencies, all recorded and replicated. The singularity is just a bonus, a demonstration of what humans can do with Star Sculptor technology. You're insane, Morrison growled, reaching for his weapon. This station has 5,000 people. A pulse from Weber's device sent everyone but Mike and Lintara stumbling. Sarah hit her console hard. Roberts barely caught Morrison before he fell. Quantum dampening field, Weber explained, affects human nervous systems. Though you two, he studied Mike and Lintara with clinical interest. Your synchronization created something unexpected, something the consortium will be very interested in studying. Mike felt Lintara's field reach for his, their earlier connection strengthening instinctively. The sabotage, the system failures. You were testing us, pushing us to synchronize. And you performed beautifully. Weber adjusted his device. Now, shall we see what happens when I push you further? Energy surged through the room. Mike's skin burned with quantum resonance as Lintara's field wrapped around him protectively. Her surface blazed with patterns he'd never seen before. Raw, uncontrolled, emotional. Mike! Her voice carried harmonics of fear, anger, and something deeper. I can't. The field is too strong. I can't maintain control of my form. Then don't. He turned to face her, ignoring Weber's weapon. You don't have to maintain control. Not with me. Her patterns stuttered, vulnerability bleeding through her diplomatic facades. You don't understand. Without control, the quantum resonance between us will become permanent, unbreakable. In my culture, it's, I understand perfectly. Mike stepped closer, feeling their fields intertwine. And I meant what I said before. I'll touch you, really touch you, but only when you're ready to be real with me. No more diplomatic masks, no more games. Weber laughed. How touching. But the consortium needs weapons, not romance. Now let's see what happens when I destabilize both your quantum fields at once. The device pulsed again. This time the energy tore through their protective resonance. Lintera's form began to fragment, patterns dissolving into chaos. Mike felt their connection starting to break. Stay with me, he gasped, fighting against the quantum interference. Lintera, look at me. Not the ambassador, not the star sculptor. Just you. Her surface erupted in patterns he recognized from their first meeting. Attraction, interest, challenge. But now stripped of artifice. Raw emotion made visible in quantum light. I am looking, she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke directly to his soul. I've been looking since the moment I saw you. The human who doesn't flinch, doesn't retreat, who sees past the surface to what's beneath. Their fields merged completely, quantum resonance reaching levels that made Weber's instruments spark and fail. The containment unit cracked. Impossible, Weber breathed. These readings are what happens, Lintara said, her form stabilizing into something new. Neither fully diplomatic nor completely uncontrolled, but authentically herself, when connection transcends physics. The quantum singularity in the core pulsed, threatening imminent collapse. But now, wrapped in their combined fields, Mike could see the patterns within patterns, the solution hidden in chaos. Together? He asked, offering his hand. Lintara's form flowed around him, through him, patterns syncing with his bioelectricity until it was impossible to tell where he ended and she began. Together. Their unified field expanded, reaching through the station systems to touch the forming singularity. Weber's device exploded as they channeled its energy, using the quantum resonance he'd tried to weaponize to instead stabilize the core. Warning, the AI announced. Quantum singularity contained. Station systems restoring. Morrison recovered first, securing Weber, while Roberts helped Sarah to her feet. But Mike barely noticed, too caught up in the sensation of being quantumly entangled with a being of living light. Well, Lintara said, her patterns now displaying emotions so clear, he wondered how he'd ever found them mysterious. I believe you said something about touching me when I was ready to be real. Mike laughed, feeling her amusement ripple through their shared field. I did. Though I should warn you, now that we're quantumly entangled, that offer might be permanently on the table. Quantum entanglement is just the beginning, she purred, her form shifting to brush against him in ways that sent shivers through both their energy fields. Wait until you experience Star Sculptor dating customs. Could we maybe deal with the attempted quantum terrorism first? Morrison interrupted, though his stern expression had softened slightly. Before you two break any more laws of physics? Sarah was already recording readings, her scientific excitement overwhelming any lingering effects from Weber's attack. The quantum bonding patterns are incredible. The resonance frequencies suggest a permanent link between their energy fields that could revolutionize our understanding of. Dr. Chen, Roberts cut in gently, maybe give them a moment before you turn their relationship into a research paper. As the others dealt with Weber and the station's recovery, Mike and Lintara remained connected, their fields humming with shared resonance. Her surface displayed patterns of contentment, trust, and anticipation, all genuine, all meant for him. You know, Mike said, watching the play of quantum light between them. When they said this assignment would involve hands-on work with advanced alien technology, this wasn't exactly what I pictured. Lintara's laugh sent cascades of joy through their entangled fields. Disappointed? Not even slightly. He smiled as new patterns of affection rippled across her surface. Though I do have one question. Yes? Does quantum entanglement count as a third date? Her response was a display of patterns that made the recovering station lights flicker and Sarah's instruments short out completely. Some things, it seemed, transcended translation. Dear listener, in the vast expanse of human imagination, where stars dance and possibilities are endless, we find ourselves drawn to stories that challenge our perceptions of love, connection, and what it means to truly understand someone different from ourselves. Touch Them, I Dare You isn't just a tale of attraction between a human mechanic and an ethereal star sculptor. It's a mirror reflecting our own desires, fears, and hopes about intimate connections in an increasingly complex world. Through Mike and Lintara's story, we explore the beautiful truth that real connection transcends physical form. Their dance of attraction, played out through electromagnetic fields and quantum resonance, reminds us that true intimacy isn't just about physical touch. It's about the courage to let someone past our carefully constructed barriers, whether those barriers are made of diplomatic protocols or emotional walls. Consider how Lintara's ever-shifting form represents the fluid nature of all relationships. Like her surface patterns, our connections with others constantly evolve, creating new and beautiful configurations we never could have imagined. Mike's willingness to embrace this uncertainty, to step into the unknown without letting fear hold him back, speaks to the courage we all need when opening ourselves to new relationships. The technical challenges they face together, quantum harmonizers, power fluctuations, and mysterious sabotage, serve as metaphors for the obstacles we all encounter in our pursuit of meaningful connections. Just as Mike and Lintara must synchronize their electromagnetic fields to overcome these challenges, we too must find ways to align with others, to create harmony from our differences rather than letting them drive us apart. Their story reminds us that the most profound connections often come when we least expect them, and sometimes with people or beings who seem entirely different from ourselves. It challenges us to look beyond surface appearances, to find the resonance that exists between all conscious beings, regardless of their former origin. The humor and playfulness in their interactions, even in dangerous situations, reflects an essential truth about love and attraction, that joy and laughter are just as important as passion and desire. Their witty exchanges and clever wordplay show us that intellectual connection can be just as intoxicating as physical attraction. But perhaps most importantly, this story asks us to consider what it truly means to be compatible with another person. Is it about physical similarity, shared background, or is it something deeper, a resonance of spirit, a harmony of purpose, a willingness to see past our preconceptions and truly know another being? As you reflect on this tale, I invite you to consider your own relationships. What barriers have you built around your heart? What forms of connection have you dismissed as impossible or impractical? What beautiful patterns might emerge if you allowed yourself to synchronize with someone different from yourself? Remember that every great love story, whether between human and star sculptor or simply between two people from different worlds, begins with a moment of courage. The courage to reach out, to risk rejection, to be vulnerable. Like Mike standing in that maintenance tunnel, feeling the electric tingle of Lintara's presence, we all face moments where we must choose between safe distance and exciting possibility. Let this story be an inspiration to embrace those moments, to dare to touch, to connect, to synchronize with others in ways that might seem impossible at first glance. Because in the end, the most beautiful relationships are often the ones that challenge our assumptions about what love and connection can be. And who knows, perhaps somewhere out there in the vast cosmos, there's someone whose patterns would harmonize perfectly with your own, if only you're brave enough to find out. So go forth, dear reader, with the courage of Mike and the adaptability of Lintara. Let your heart be open to connections that defy conventional understanding. Because in a universe as vast and wonderful as ours, the only true limit to love is our willingness to explore its infinite possibilities. Remember, every great connection starts with a simple dare: to reach out, to be vulnerable, to touch someone's heart in ways that transcend the physical. Are you ready to take that dare? With cosmic affection and quantum resonance, your storyteller PS. And if you ever find yourself face to face with a being of living light and shifting patterns, remember Mike's example. Sometimes the most powerful response to an impossible situation is simply to smile, Step forward and say, game on.